Krelvan remembered that day with perfect clarity, even though years had passed since then. He sat in the briefing room aboard the command ship, surrounded by his fellow soldiers. Everyone was excited. Everyone was confident. They had done this before many times. Commander Thexal stood at the front of the room, his scales gleaming under the bright lights. Behind him, images of the target planet rotated slowly on the display screen. It looked peaceful, green and blue, with white clouds drifting across its surface. The humans called it New Jeju. "This will be quick," Thexal said, his voice filled with certainty. "The humans are weak. They only discovered faster-than-light travel 20 years ago. They are babies in the galaxy." The soldiers laughed. Krelvan laughed too. He was young then, barely past his military training. This would be his first real combat mission, and he felt ready. The Vorlax Empire had conquered 43 species before this. 43 victories. The humans would be number 44. Vrenok, sitting next to Krelvan, leaned over and whispered, "I heard they are slow breeders. Only 1 or 2 offspring at a time. Can you imagine?" Krelvan shook his head. Vorlax females could lay 20 eggs in a single season. These humans seemed pathetically weak by comparison. The commander continued his briefing. "Intelligence reports show approximately 2 million humans on this colony world. Most are farmers and miners. They have minimal military presence. We will land with 50,000 warriors. The odds are greatly in our favor." The display changed to show images of humans. Krelvan studied them carefully. They were strange creatures standing upright on 2 legs like the Vorlax, but their bodies were soft. No scales, no natural armor, just pink or brown skin that looked fragile. They had hair growing from their heads in various colors. Their eyes were small and their teeth were flat except for a few pointed ones. "Look at them," Zilmar said from Krelvan's other side. "They look like they would break if you touched them." "Notice their physical limitations," Thexal said, pointing at the images. "They cannot see in the dark like we can. Their hearing is inferior. They have no natural weapons, no claws or venom. They evolved on a world with higher gravity than most, which makes them somewhat strong for their size, but this is their only advantage. And it is not enough." The commander pulled up more data. "Human psychology is also a weakness. They form emotional attachments easily. They care about individual lives. This makes them hesitant in combat. They will surrender quickly when they see our superior force." Krelvan absorbed all this information. It made sense. The Vorlax were natural warriors. They had evolved on a harsh world where only the strong survived. Their empire had spread across dozens of star systems because they were superior. These soft, weak humans would fall easily. "Our strategy is simple," Thexal continued. "We land in the northern territories at dawn. We take the capital city first. Once we control the government center, the rest of the colony will surrender. We have seen this pattern with every species we have conquered. The humans will be no different." The briefing lasted another hour. They reviewed landing zones, supply lines, and communication protocols. Everything was planned down to the smallest detail. The Vorlax military was efficient and organized. Nothing would go wrong. After the briefing ended, Krelvan walked to the observation deck with Vrenok and Zilmar. They looked down at the planet below. It looked so peaceful from space. In a few days, it would belong to the Vorlax Empire. "I wonder if we will even see real combat," Vrenok said. "The humans might surrender as soon as we land." "I hope not," Zilmar replied. "I want to prove myself in battle." Krelvan understood the feeling. He wanted to prove himself too. He wanted to return home with stories of victory, with honor earned in combat. He had trained for years for this moment. "Do you think the reports are accurate?" Krelvan asked. "About the humans being weak?" Vrenok laughed. "Of course. Intelligence is never wrong. Besides, look at them. They are obviously inferior." An older soldier walked past them. His name was Tokir, and he had survived 15 campaigns. He heard their conversation and stopped. "Do not be too confident," he said quietly. "Every species fights differently. The humans may surprise you." "How?" Zilmar asked. "They have no advantages." Tokir looked at the planet below. "That is what we said about the Krelix too. We thought they would be easy because they were small. But they were clever. They used tactics we did not expect. Many good soldiers died before we adapted. But we still won," Vrenok said. "Yes," Tokir agreed. "We won. But victory always has a price." He walked away, leaving the young soldiers to think about his words. Krelvan felt a small doubt creep into his mind. but he pushed it away. Tokir was old and cautious. The briefing had been clear. The humans were weak. This would be an easy victory. The next 2 days passed in preparation. Krelvan checked his weapons and armor repeatedly. He reviewed the battle plans until he had memorized every detail. He ate well and slept when he could. Other soldiers did the same. The ship buzzed with activity and excitement. On the final night before the landing, Krelvan lay in his bunk and thought about home. He thought about his family, about his village, about the life he would return to after this victory. He would have honor. He would have status. Perhaps he would even receive a promotion. He did not think about the humans as people. He thought about them as obstacles to overcome, as a step toward his goals. The briefings had trained him to see them this way. They were the enemy. They were inferior. They would lose. Looking back now, years later, Krelvan could barely recognize that young soldier. He had been so confident, so sure of himself, so ignorant of what was coming. He did not know then that everything the briefing taught him was wrong. He did not know that the humans would change everything he believed about strength, about warfare, about survival itself. He did not know that in a few short weeks, he would feel true terror for the first time in his life. But he would learn. They would all learn the hard way. The landing pods hit the ground hard. Krelvan felt the impact through his entire body as the door hissed open. He stepped out onto human soil for the first time, his weapon ready. The northern territories of New Jeju stretched before him. Rolling hills covered in strange crops. Small buildings scattered across the landscape. The air smelled different from the ship, filled with growing things and soil. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in orange and pink colors. Krelvan's squad moved forward in formation. Vrenok was on his left, Zilmar on his right. 50 other soldiers spread out across the field. Everything was going according to plan. Then the shooting started. The first blast came from a farmhouse 200 meters away. It hit Zilmar in the chest, dropping him instantly. Krelvan dove for cover behind a metal container, his heart racing. This was not supposed to happen. The humans were supposed to surrender. More shots came from different directions. The humans had set up defensive positions during the night. They had been waiting. They had been ready. Return fire, the squad leader shouted. The Vorlax soldiers began shooting at the farmhouse. The building exploded under the barrage. But the firing did not stop. It came from other positions, from places Krelvan could not see. He spotted movement near a stone wall. A human figure wearing green and brown clothing that blended with the environment. Krelvan aimed and fired. He missed. The human fired back, and the shot burned past Krelvan's head so close he felt the heat. His hands were shaking. He had never been shot at before. Training was nothing like this. The battle lasted for 3 hours. When it finally ended, 12 Vorlax soldiers were dead. 20 more were wounded. The humans had retreated, but they had made the landing force pay for every meter of ground. Krelvan looked at Zilmar's body. His friend was dead, killed in the first minute of combat. The young soldier felt something cold settle in his stomach. This was real. This was not a training exercise. Over the next week, the pattern repeated. The Vorlax forces pushed forward, taking territory, but the humans fought for every centimeter. They did not surrender. They did not panic. They fought with a determination that shocked the invaders. Krelvan saw things that did not make sense. He saw a human soldier with a leg wound continue fighting when any Vorlax would have retreated for medical care. He saw humans deliberately expose themselves to enemy fire to protect their wounded. He saw them refuse to surrender even when surrounded. On the 8th day, Krelvan's squad was ordered to secure a small town. They approached carefully, expecting resistance. They found it. The human commander defending the town was named Daewon. Krelvan learned his name later from the recordings. At the time, he only knew him as the enemy soldier who would not die. Daewon led 20 human defenders against Krelvan's squad of 40 Vorlax. The battle should have been quick. It was not. The humans used the buildings as cover. They set traps in the streets. They appeared from unexpected angles, fired, then disappeared again. Krelvan felt like he was fighting ghosts. Then he saw Daewon directly. The human commander was hit by plasma fire in the shoulder. The wound was serious, burning through flesh and bone. Any Vorlax would have collapsed. Daewon stumbled, fell to one knee, then stood back up. He switched his weapon to his other hand and kept fighting. Krelvan could not believe what he was seeing. The human should have been finished. But Daewon kept moving, kept shooting, kept giving orders to his soldiers. He fought for another 20 minutes before finally retreating with his squad. The Vorlax took the town, but it cost them 14 soldiers. For a town with no strategic value, for a position the humans abandoned anyway. That night, Krelvan sat with Vrenok and tried to understand what was happening. "They do not fight like the briefing said they would," Krelvan said quietly. "They are animals," Vrenok replied, but his voice lacked confidence. "They do not know when to surrender." "Or they refuse to surrender," Krelvan said. "That is different. They intercepted human communications the next day." The translation was rough but clear enough. The humans were evacuating civilians from the combat zones. The soldiers were buying time, deliberately sacrificing themselves to protect the non-combatants. This confused Krelvan deeply. Why would trained soldiers die for civilians? It made no tactical sense. The civilians were not important to the military outcome, but the humans acted as if every life mattered equally. 2 weeks into the invasion, a civilian militia appeared. These were not trained soldiers. They were farmers, miners, teachers. A man named Taejun led them. He had been a farmer before the war. Now he fought with improvised weapons and determination. Taejun's militia could not win direct battles against Vorlax soldiers, so they did not fight directly. They ambushed supply convoys. They destroyed communication equipment. They set fires and planted explosives. They made the occupation expensive in blood and resources. Krelvan's squad was ambushed by the militia on a mountain road. The humans rolled boulders down on them, blocking their escape. Then they attacked from above with rifles and homemade explosives. 6 Vorlax died before the squad could fight free. During the ambush, Krelvan saw Taejun clearly. The human was older, maybe 50 standard years. He moved with a limp, but his eyes were fierce and his hands were steady. He looked at Krelvan across the battlefield, and in that moment Krelvan felt something new. Fear. Not fear of death. Fear of something deeper. Fear of facing an enemy who would never stop, never surrender, never give up. The reports from other units were similar. The humans fought everywhere. In the cities, in the countryside, in the mountains. They used tactics the Vorlax had never seen before. They studied their enemy, learned weaknesses, and exploited them. A female human named Hana led a tactical unit that specialized in night operations. The Vorlax had better night vision, but Hana's team used thermal imaging and careful planning to overcome this advantage. They struck at supply depots and command posts always at night, always disappearing before reinforcements arrived. Commander Thexal insisted the invasion was going well. The Vorlax controlled the major cities. The humans were being pushed back. Victory was close. But Krelvan saw the truth in the eyes of his fellow soldiers. They were afraid. The easy victory had become a grinding struggle. The weak humans had become a nightmare opponent. 3 weeks after landing, Krelvan's squad received new orders. Hold a checkpoint on the main road to the capital. Simple duty, standard procedure. But as he took his position, Krelvan felt the cold fear in his stomach again. Nothing about this war was simple. Nothing was standard. The humans had taught him that, and they were not finished teaching yet. The reinforcements arrived on the 42nd day of the invasion. Krelvan watched the human ships drop from orbit, and he felt his hope die. The briefing had said humans were scattered across many colony worlds. The briefing had said they would not unite quickly. The briefing had been wrong about everything else. Why had Krelvan believed it would be right about this? The new human forces were different from the colony defenders. These were professional soldiers from Earth and other established worlds. They wore better armor. They carried better weapons. They moved with the confidence of trained warriors, and there were thousands of them. Commander Thexal still insisted victory was possible. The Vorlax controlled the cities. They had fortified positions. They could hold until their own reinforcements arrived, but reinforcements were not coming. Krelvan heard the whispers among the officers. The Vorlax fleet had engaged human warships in orbit. The battle had not gone well. The command ship was destroyed. The remaining Vorlax ships had retreated to the edge of the system. The ground forces were alone. The human counterattack began in the mountains. Hana, the tactical commander who specialized in night operations, led a unit deep into Vorlax-held territory. They hit 3 supply depots in one night. Without supplies, the northern garrisons began to weaken. Krelvan's squad was sent to reinforce a mountain pass. The pass controlled access to the lowlands. If the humans took it, they could cut off half the Vorlak's army. The squad arrived at the pass in the afternoon. The position looked strong. High walls of stone on both sides. Good sight lines. Defensive positions already built by previous units. But Krelvan felt uneasy. The pass was too quiet. That night the temperature dropped. The weather on New Jeju changed quickly in the mountains. Within hours it was below freezing. Snow began to fall. The Vorlak soldiers suffered immediately. They had evolved on a warm world. Cold weather made them slow and weak. Their weapons worked poorly in the low temperatures. Their armor provided little insulation. The humans attacked at midnight. They came through the snow like ghosts. They wore white clothing that made them invisible in the storm. They moved easily through the cold while the Vorlak struggled to even hold their weapons. A human named Young Su led the assault. He was a demolitions expert. He had planted explosives along the pass walls during the previous week, disguised as natural rock. When the battle started, he triggered them. The walls came down. Tons of stone fell on the Vorlak's positions. Half the squad died instantly, crushed under the rockfall. The survivors tried to retreat, but the humans had blocked the exit. Krelvan found himself separated from his unit. He stumbled through the snow, his body barely functioning in the cold. He saw Vrenok fall, hit by human fire. He did not know if his friend was dead or wounded. He could not stop to check. A human soldier appeared in front of him. Female, young, holding a rifle with perfect steadiness despite the cold. Her name was Mireille, though Krelvan would not learn this until later. She could have killed him. Her rifle was aimed at his head. But she hesitated. Why? In that moment of hesitation, another Vorlak soldier fired at her from behind cover. Mireille dove aside and disappeared into the snow. Krelvan ran the other direction, his only thought to survive. The battle at the pass was a disaster for the Vorlaks. Only 8 soldiers from Krelvan's squad survived. The humans took the pass with minimal casualties. They understood the environment. They used it as a weapon. This pattern repeated across the planet. Humans fought in extreme cold. They fought in extreme heat. They fought in low oxygen environments that made Vorlak soldiers pass out. Their bodies adapted to conditions that should have been impossible. Krelvan began to understand something the briefings had never mentioned. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill them. Their planet had extreme temperature variations, dangerous predators, diseases, and natural disasters. Surviving Earth had made them incredibly adaptable. The Vorlaks had evolved on an easy world. Warm, stable, predictable. They were specialists perfectly adapted to their environment. But specialists cannot adapt easily to new conditions. Humans were generalists. They could adapt to anything. 3 days after the mountain pass battle, something strange happened. A human medic named Sojin entered a Vorlak's field hospital under a white flag. She was alone and unarmed. The Vorlak soldiers nearly shot her. But she kept her hands raised and spoke in broken Vorlak's language. "I am doctor. I help wounded." The Vorlak's commander did not understand. Why would an enemy medic want to help them? Sojin explained slowly. There were wounded humans in Vorlak's custody. There were wounded Vorlaks in human custody. She wanted to arrange an exchange and provide medical care to both sides. The concept confused Krelvan. He had been taught that enemies existed only to be destroyed. But here was a human risking her life to help the wounded, regardless of which side they fought for. The exchange happened. Sojin treated both human and Vorlak's wounded with the same care and skill. She worked for 6 hours straight, saving lives on both sides. When she left, Krelvan felt different. He could not hate an enemy who valued life like this. He could not see humans as mindless animals when they showed such compassion. But the war continued. The humans began broadcasting messages in Vorlak's language, psychological warfare. The messages described Vorlak's defeats in detail. They talked about the destroyed fleet in orbit. They urged soldiers to surrender and promised fair treatment. Commander Thexel ordered the messages to be ignored. He called them lies and propaganda. But soldiers whispered in the night. They wondered if the messages were true. Krelvan learned something else during this time. The humans were fighting with restraint. They had rules about warfare, rules about protecting civilians, rules about treating prisoners, rules about what weapons could be used. This shocked him. The Vorlaks had no such rules. They fought to win by any means necessary. But the humans had laws that limited their own power even during war. What kind of species handicapped themselves like this? What kind of warriors fought with one hand tied behind their back? And yet, despite these restrictions, the humans were winning. A captured human officer explained it to Krelvan during an interrogation. The officer's name was Byung-ho. He was calm and polite even as a prisoner. "We could have used more destructive weapons," Byung-ho said. "We could have burned your positions from orbit. We could have used biological weapons or chemical weapons. We have these things, but we choose not to." "Why?" Krelvan asked. "Because we are not fighting to destroy you," Byung-ho replied. "We are fighting to stop you." There is a difference. Krelvan did not understand. In Vorlak's culture, an enemy was an enemy. You destroyed them completely or you were weak. But maybe, he thought, maybe the humans understood something the Vorlaks did not. The human counterattack pushed deeper into Vorlak's held territory. More soldiers died every day. Supplies ran low. Medical care became scarce. Morale collapsed. Commander Thexal planned one final assault. Gather all remaining forces and strike at the human command center. A desperate gamble for victory. Krelvan knew it would fail. They were beaten. The question now was not whether they would lose, but how many would die before the end. He thought about Zilmar, dead on the first day. He thought about Vrenok, wounded in the mountain pass. He thought about Tokir, the old soldier who had warned them. Toker was dead now too, killed in the fighting. The humans had been underestimated. That mistake had cost thousands of lives, and the war was not over yet. The human fleet appeared in the sky like gods of war. Krelvan watched from the ground as massive ships broke through the clouds. They moved with purpose and power. The remaining Vorlak's orbital positions were destroyed within hours. The ground forces were trapped. No escape, no reinforcements, no hope. Commander Thexal gave the order for the final assault anyway. Every available soldier would attack the human command center at dawn. It was suicide, but the commander could not accept defeat. His pride would not allow it. Krelvan prepared for the assault with empty feelings. He checked his weapon mechanically. He said nothing to the soldiers around him. What was there to say? They were all going to die. The assault began at first light. 3,000 Vorlak soldiers charged across open ground toward the human defensive positions. It was madness. The humans had fortifications, artillery, and air support. The Vorlaks had desperation and pride. The battle lasted 40 minutes. It was a slaughter. Krelvan was hit in the leg during the first wave of fire. He fell and could not get up. Around him, soldiers died in dozens, then hundreds. The human defenses held easily. They barely needed to try. When the firing stopped, Krelvan lay among the dead and dying. His leg burned with pain. He could hear others calling for help in Vorlak's language. No help came. The medics were dead or wounded themselves. Then he heard footsteps, heavy boots on dirt. He opened his eyes and saw a human soldier standing over him. The human was tall and broad, wearing armor marked with medical symbols. His name tag read, Byung-ho. It was the same officer Krelvan had helped interrogate weeks ago. Byung-ho knelt beside Krelvan. "Can you understand me?" he asked in Vorlak's language. Krelvan nodded weakly. "I am going to treat your wound," Byung-ho said. "Do not fight me." Krelvan did not fight. He did not have the strength. He watched as Byung-ho cleaned and bandaged his leg wound with professional care. The human could have killed him. Instead, he was saving his life. "Why?" Krelvan whispered. "Because you are wounded and I am a medic," Byung-ho replied simply. "This is my job." Around them, other human medics moved among the Vorlak's wounded. They provided care without discrimination. Enemy or not, the wounded received treatment. Krelvan was taken to a human medical facility. He was placed in a clean bed. His wound was treated properly. He was given food and water. He was not tortured or abused. This confused him more than anything else in the war. The Vorlaks had invaded human space. They had killed human soldiers and civilians. They had tried to conquer this world. And yet the humans treated their prisoners with kindness. On the third day of captivity, a human officer came to speak with him. She wore an admiral's uniform. Her name was Ji-woo. She sat down across from Krelvan and looked at him with calm eyes. "Commander Thexal is dead," Ji-woo said. He died in the assault. Most of your officers are dead or captured. Your fleet is destroyed. You have no way to leave this planet. Krelvan said nothing. He already knew all this. I am authorized to offer terms of surrender, Jiwoo continued. All Vorlak soldiers who surrender will be treated according to the rules of war. You will be held as prisoners until arrangements can be made to return you to your space. You will not be harmed. You will not be executed. Why offer mercy? Krelvan asked. We would not have been merciful to you. Jiwoo smiled sadly. I know. We studied your empire. We know about the species you have conquered. We know you do not take prisoners. You enslave or kill. But we are not like you. She pulled out a data pad and showed Krelvan information. Information about human history, wars between human nations, millions dead in conflicts that lasted years, weapons of terrible destruction, genocides and atrocities. We have done terrible things to each other, Jiwoo said quietly. Humans have killed humans by the millions. We know the cost of hatred. We know what happens when you fight without limits. So we made rules. Rules to prevent the worst horrors. Rules to preserve some humanity even in war. Krelvan looked at the images. Human cities destroyed. Human bodies in mass graves. Human weapons that could burn entire continents. You were holding back, he said, his voice hollow. Yes, Jiwoo confirmed. We could have destroyed you completely. We chose not to, because we want this war to end, not to continue forever. She left him with the data pad. Krelvan spent days reading about human history. He learned about their evolution. They were persistence hunters who chased prey for days until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. They were social creatures who formed complex groups and alliances. They were adaptable, able to survive in nearly any environment on their planet, but most importantly, they were survivors of endless conflict. Humans had fought each other for thousands of years. They had learned hard lessons about war and peace. They had built sophisticated ideas about honor and mercy. The Vorlax had never needed such ideas. They were always the strongest. They always won. They never had to think about losing. Now Krelvan understood. The humans were terrifying not because they were strong. They were terrifying because they understood war better than any species in the galaxy. More Vorlax soldiers surrendered over the following days. Some chose ritual suicide instead, unable to accept the shame of defeat. Krelvan understood their choice, but he did not follow it. He wanted to live. He wanted to understand. He wanted to take this knowledge back to his people. One day, a familiar face appeared in the medical facility. It was Daewon, the human commander who had fought so fiercely in the early battles. He walked with a limp now. His shoulder was scarred from the plasma wound, but he was alive. Daewon stopped by Krelvan's bed. They looked at each other for a long moment. I remember you, Daewon said. You were at the town. You saw me get hit. Yes, Krelvan replied. I thought you would die from that wound. Almost did, Daewon said with a slight smile. But humans are stubborn. I noticed, Krelvan said dryly. They talked for a while. Daewon explained that he was now involved in diplomatic efforts. The humans wanted to establish communication with the Vorlax Empire. They wanted to prevent future wars. We did not want this war, Daewon said. But we will not allow our people to be conquered. We will defend ourselves, always. I understand now, Krelvan said. The briefing was wrong about everything. You are not weak. You are the most dangerous species I have ever encountered. Daewon nodded slowly. Dangerous when we need to be. But we prefer peace. We would rather trade than fight. We would rather build than destroy. But if you push us, if you threaten our people, we will respond. And we will not stop until the threat is gone. Krelvan believed him. He had seen it himself. The war ended officially 2 weeks later. The remaining Vorlax forces surrendered. Arrangements were made to return prisoners to Vorlax space under neutral escort. Krelvan would be going home. But he was not the same soldier who had landed on New Jeju months ago. That confident young warrior was dead, killed by the lessons of war. In his place was someone different, someone who understood that strength came in many forms, someone who had learned to respect an enemy, someone who knew that facing humans in combat was terror itself. 5 years had passed since the war ended. Krelvan sat in a small office on a neutral trading station, looking out at the stars. His legs still ached sometimes, especially when the station's artificial gravity fluctuated, a reminder of the battle that changed his life. He worked as a translator and cultural liaison now. He helped species understand each other. He helped prevent conflicts before they started. It was important work, work that mattered. The door opened and a young human walked in. She was maybe 20 years old, carrying a recording device and a notebook. Her name was Sumin, and she was a university student researching the war. "Thank you for agreeing to this interview," Sumin said, sitting down across from him. "You are welcome," Krelvan replied in fluent human language. He had spent years learning it. Understanding language was the first step to understanding people. Sumin set up her recording equipment. "I want to understand the Vorlak's perspective on the war. History records the facts, but I want to know what it felt like, what you experienced." Krelvan took a moment to gather his thoughts. Where to begin? How to explain what it meant to face humans in combat? "We underestimated you," he said simply. "Everything we believed was wrong. We thought you were weak because you had no natural weapons. We thought you were slow because you did not have our strength. We thought you would surrender quickly because you cared about individual lives. But we did not surrender," Sumin said. "No," Krelvan agreed. "You fought with a determination that terrified us. You adapted to every situation. You turned your weaknesses into strengths. You used the environment as a weapon. You outthought us at every turn." Sumin made notes. "What was the moment when you realized you would lose?" Krelvan thought back. There were many moments. Watching Day One fight with a terrible wound. Seeing Hana's team operate in conditions that should have been impossible. The human medic So-Jin treating our wounded. Each moment taught me something new about your species." He paused, remembering. "But the real understanding came later when I was a prisoner. When I learned about your history." "What did you learn?" Sumin asked. "That humans have been fighting for thousands of years. Not against other species, against each other. You fought wars that killed millions of your own kind. You developed weapons that could destroy your entire planet. You faced threats that should have wiped you out." Krelvan leaned forward. "And you survived all of it. You learned from it. You made rules about warfare to prevent the worst horrors. You built complicated ideas about honor and mercy and the value of life. You became the most sophisticated warriors in the galaxy, not through strength but through understanding." Sumin was quiet for a moment. "You sound like you respect us now." "I do," Krelvan said honestly. "I respect and fear you in equal measure. Humans are dangerous not because of your weapons or your numbers. You are dangerous because you refuse to quit, because you adapt, because you can be both brutal and compassionate sometimes in the same moment." He thought about his time in human custody, the treatment he received, the fair trials, the diplomatic efforts to establish peace. "The Vorlaks conquered 43 species before we met humans," Krelvan continued. "We enslaved some. We exterminated others. We always won because we were stronger and more aggressive. But humans taught us that strength is not enough. That aggression without wisdom is just stupidity." "What happened to the Vorlak's empire after the war?" Sumin asked. "We changed," Krelvan said. "Not quickly. Not easily. But we changed. The empire stopped expanding. We released some of the conquered species. We began seeking peaceful trade relationships instead of conquest." He smiled slightly. "Humans had something to do with that. Your fleet visited our homeworld after the war, not to attack but to talk. Admiral Jiwoo herself came. She explained very clearly what would happen if the Vorlaks ever invaded human space again." "What did she say?" Sumin asked, curious. "She said that the war on New Jeju was a warning, a demonstration of human capabilities. She said that if the Vorlaks ever threatened humanity again, the response would be total. No mercy, no restraint. Complete destruction of the Vorlaks' military and the empire itself." Krelvan remembered that meeting. The entire Vorlaks leadership had watched as Jiwoo laid out exactly how humans could destroy them. She showed them weapons that had never been used on New Jeju. She explained strategies that would overwhelm Vorlak's defenses. She made it absolutely clear that humans had been holding back. "And we believed her," Krelvan said quietly. because we had seen what humans could do when they were being merciful. We did not want to see what they could do when they were not. The door opened again. A familiar figure entered. Daewon, older now with gray hair starting to show, walked in with his characteristic limp. "Krelvan," he said warmly. "I heard you were being interviewed. Thought I would stop by." Krelvan stood and clasped hands with the human. Over the years, they had become something like friends. It was strange being friends with someone who had once been his enemy. But many strange things had become normal. Sumin looked excited. "Commander Daewon, would you be willing to answer some questions too?" "Of course," Daewon said, sitting down. "What do you want to know?" "What was it like fighting the Vorlax?" Sumin asked. Daewon glanced at Krelvan. "Difficult. They are strong, organized, and experienced. They had conquered many species before us. We knew we could not beat them through strength alone. So how did you win?" Sumin asked. "Endurance," Daewon said simply. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters. We are not the fastest or strongest, but we can keep going longer than almost any other species. We can adapt to extreme conditions. We can operate on minimal resources. We can maintain morale even in terrible situations," he continued. "The Vorlax expected a quick victory. When they did not get it, when we kept fighting day after day, their confidence broke. They were specialists who had never faced a serious challenge. We were generalists who had survived countless challenges." Krelvan nodded in agreement. "He is right. Humans are terrifying because you do not stop. You cannot be outlasted. You just keep coming, keep adapting, keep fighting. It is like trying to fight the tide or the wind." Sumin wrote quickly. "Do you think there will be another war between humans and Vorlax?" "No," both Krelvan and Daewon said at the same time. Daewon explained. "The Vorlax learned their lesson. They know humans will defend themselves absolutely, and humans have no interest in conquest. We have enough challenges managing our own expansion. We prefer peace," Krelvan added. "War with humans is too expensive, too costly. And for what? Your species offers more value as trading partners than as enemies." The interview continued for another hour. Sumin asked about specific battles, about cultural differences, about the diplomatic process that followed the war. Finally, she asked one last question. "If you could go back and give advice to your younger self before the invasion, what would you say?" Krelvan thought carefully. "I would tell him that strength comes in many forms, that the most dangerous enemy is not the one who looks powerful, but the one who refuses to accept defeat. I would tell him to respect all species because you never know what capabilities they might have." He paused, "But mostly I would tell him to learn about humans before fighting them. Because if you understand humans, you understand something fundamental about survival and adaptation. You understand what it means to face impossible odds and keep fighting anyway." Daewon added his own thought. "I would tell younger soldiers on both sides that war should always be the last option, because once it starts, everyone loses something, even the winners." After the interview ended and Sumin left, Krelvan and Daewon sat together quietly. "Do you ever regret surviving?" Daewon asked suddenly. Krelvan considered the question. "Sometimes. There is shame in defeat among my people. Some think I should have chosen death. But I am glad I survived. I learned things that I could not have learned any other way." "Like what?" Daewon asked. "Like mercy is not weakness. Like different species have different kinds of strength. Like the most important battles are the ones you avoid fighting." Krelvan looked at his friend. "Like former enemies can become friends." Daewon smiled. "That is a good lesson." They sat together watching ships come and go from the station. Humans and Vorlax and dozens of other species all trading and talking and living together peacefully. The war was over. The lessons remained. And Krelvan carried those lessons every day, teaching others what he had learned through pain and loss and eventual understanding, that facing humans in combat was terror. But understanding humans was wisdom, and wisdom was worth any price.